Welcome to the Volleyball Australia introduction video exploring the FIVB rules of the game 2025 to 2028, specifically new changes. The new official rules have been released by FIVB at the start of 2025 and apply until the end of 2028. In this video, we highlight and detail the key rule changes, the intent for them, as well as the application of these rules for players, coaches, and officials. Let's begin. There are three key changes in the rules, and these relate to screening, player actions at the serve, positions for the serving team, improving defense readiness and reducing screening, balls passing outside the crossing space, that is through the external space when balls pass outside or directly above the antenna. Along with these, there were some general wording updates and clarifications. Let's go through each of the three key rule changes in more detail. 1. Screening at the serve. Under Rule 12.5 Screening, a new section, 12.5.3, has been added. It reads as follows. Any player of the serving team is forbidden to raise hands above their head during service until the ball has passed beyond the net. The first referee is permitted to caution, advise, a team through the game captain if he/she suspects that it is deliberately screening. Now, similar wording was actually included in the 2024 referee guidelines and was implemented during the past year at the highest levels of the game, including the most recent 2024 Paris Olympics. The intent behind this explicit addition is to enhance fair play. This change was approved at the 2024 FIVB Congress, overwhelmingly being passed with 96.79% vote in favor of the change. So what does this mean? Put simply, it means that during the serve and until the ball passes the net, players on the serving team can no longer have their hands held high above their head. For example, in the past it was common to see players stand like this at the serve, particularly front row players. This is no longer allowed by the rules. Instead, the players on the serving team must now have their hands below the top of their head during the serve. Let's watch a serve from the Paris 2024 Olympic men's gold medal match. Did you notice the players of the serving team? All their hands were below the top of their heads. The other thing to notice is how all the players are standing bunched together, ready to change positions. Keep this in mind when we discuss the second key rule change. So, for referees, there are some effective strategies to manage this rule change. 1. Remind the team captains at the coin toss, at least until participants have become familiar and used to this rule. 2. Remind advised teams in between rallies if they appear to have their hands above their head during the serve. And 3. Note that just because hands were accidentally up at the serve does not necessarily mean a screen fault has been committed, so usually it's play on, but gently remind them at the next opportunity. For players and coaches, just keep your hands down at the serve. It's plain and simple. Now, let's discuss the second rule change that also applies to the serving team. 2. Removal of positional faults for the serving team. This change has two impacts on the game. Over the last quadrennial, the attack has been shown to have a significant advantage over defense. This change allows the serving team to prepare for defense before the serve is completed. Also, if you notice in our example, even though all hands were down, the players being grouped together could still potentially cause a screen. In the same spirit as Rule 12.5.3, the position rule 7.4 has been amended to allow players of the serving team to stand in any position on the court during the serve. The main change is in the second paragraph, which states, the players of the serving team, however, are free to occupy any position at the service hit. This is probably the biggest change in this rules update and was voted in favor by 95.16% at the FIVB Congress. A reminder of the key theme behind these rule changes are to enhance fair play and allow the serving team to better prepare for defense. Put simply, the serving team no longer has to stand in their assigned positions at the serve. However, as the receiving team positional faults were modified in the previous quadrennial, they must still be in position as normal. It is important to note that the 2024 referee guidelines around screening have clear references to teams clearly grouped and hands above head height as two key elements that can cause potential screens. These have now been addressed with these rule changes. Let's work through an example together. commonly saw positions like this on the court at the serve. On the left side is the serving team. Position 1 has the ball to serve and wants to move to position 5. Position 5 wants to move to position 1. Position 3 wants to move to position 4. To make this as efficient as possible, all serving team players stood close together to switch positions as soon as the serve was hit. The problem with this is that the server can serve the ball nearly over all 5 players. Even when their hands are down, this could potentially cause a screen. After the serve has been hit, the serving team players typically move to their defensive positions. So, in the spirit of fair play and with this rule change, removing the need to switch positions, the serving team can now freely prepare for defense by standing in their in-system positions and no longer need to be grouped together unnecessarily. Guidelines for first referees. Like hands above the head, watch for players on the serving team grouping unnecessarily. Work with the teams and remind and advise teams between rallies. Also, just because players stand together does not mean a fault has been committed. It is now extra vital to be proactive in knowing who is front row and who is back row for both teams, as that could be less obvious. The serving team could stand with the front row players in the back court and vice versa. For second referees, keep track of who the current server is so that when they lose serve and stand to receive, you immediately know what their correct positions are. Continue to check for receiving team positional faults as normal. You must communicate proactively with the scorer to know who the next server for both teams are, as you can expect more information requests under this rule change. Just like the first referee, it is vital to be extra attentive to who is front row and who is back row for both teams. For players and coaches, do not stand bunched together unnecessarily. There is no need to switch positions when serving. After a serving streak ends, it might be easy to forget where your correct positions are. Extra care and attention will be needed to continue the game without delay. Now let's talk about the third primary rule change we need to discuss. Three, balls outside the crossing space. We've all seen those spectacular plays where a player chases down a ball from the opponent's free zone back to their team to keep the rally alive. Amazing athleticism and skill are usually involved. However, this is only really possible if there are 2 hits remaining for the team. 1, to hit it back towards your team, and 2, to send the ball to the opponent. If the ball goes outside the crossing space on the second or third hit, it is really a lost cause as there simply aren't enough hits remaining to return the ball. Instead, the athlete only runs the risk of endangering themselves and the opponents for absolutely no gain. So, Rule 10.1 has now been changed and was passed with a 94.68% vote. Let's run through them now. Modified Rule 10.1.2. The ball, coming from the first hit of the team that has crossed the net plane to the opponent's free zone, totally or partly through the external space, may be played back within the team hits. Note the key change being the addition of the condition from the first hit of the team. New Rule 10.1.2.3. The ball sent to the opponent's free zone totally or partly through the external space, which has come from the second or third hit of the team, cannot be played back and will be judged as ball out the moment it crosses the net plane. Let's see the application of this. The ball is now considered out immediately once it crosses the net plane, totally or partially outside the crossing space. This rule change still allows spectacular recoveries after the first hit, but not after the second or third, in the best interests of participant safety. For referees, this means blowing your whistle immediately once the ball passes the plane of the net outside the crossing space after the second or third hit, as that is now considered the moment of the fault. R1 on their side, R2 on their side. For players, this means that if the second or third hit passes the plane of the net outside the crossing space, you have no right to enter the opponent's side to retrieve it. In summary, the 3 main 2025 indoor rule changes relate to 1. Hands below the top of the head at service. This is to reduce the chance for screen. 2. The serving team can stand in any position at the serve. Early preparation for the next offensive action and less chance for screen. 3. The ball is out immediately once he passes the plane of the net outside the crossing space after the second or third contacts.